Minkah Fitzpatrick may be the next Dolphins player on the outs. We're going to explore this news here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. I'm going to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Special thank you to each and every one of you who've helped to make the Locked On Podcast Network the number one sports podcast network in the world. Minkah Fitzpatrick, per a report yesterday from Jordan Schultz on the blog, is the Dolphins have been taking some phone calls around Minkah Fitzpatrick, which should not be a super big surprise relative to the Dolphins ejecting several other high-priced players at the beginning of the week. The actual report for Jordan Schultz came out 22 hours ago. Dolphins have had trade talks with teams regarding five-time Pro Bowl safety Minkah Fitzpatrick. Miami released 4 players earlier this week, including Tyreek Hill, and the early stages of resetting the roster under a new regime. A lot of interesting layers to a potential trade of Minkah, who is in the last year of his deal and is going to be in his age 30 season, but still playing at a very high level. I'd say first and foremost this, my preferred option relative to the $68 million of payroll you've already cut off the books, plus potentially if you were to move on from Austin Jackson. So that payroll getting cleared off the books, maybe a player here and a player there to trim some other players that are maybe fringe starters, but cost a few $1 million to pay. Keeping Minkah would probably be on my wish list. If I were publishing the offseason blueprint, which is my full simulated offseason that I do every year, if I were publishing it today, I would have Minkah on the books because of the other cash savings from the budget and cap implications that have been made with these other dominoes, and knowing that the Dolphins are going to be transitioning off of Tua Tagovailoa and what that means for the 2027 budget and all that kind of stuff. But if you feel like you can get a pick from Minkah, I understand at the core there's an intersection, right? And the intersection of Minkah and his trajectory later in his career, and the intersection of the Dolphins and their trajectory as a team, and getting back to the ground level and getting back to basics and building it up and what that timeline's probably going to look like. And conversely, Minkah is in the later chapters of his career where the Dolphins are just at the beginning of a process that's intending to take some time. I think Minkah would be an awesome fit for Jeff Hafley. I think the level of versatility, the Xavier McKinney influence that I think Minkah Fitzpatrick can still have, obviously the game-changing plays that he made at a couple of different incidences throughout the course of what 2025 was, showed he's still an impact player. And getting him out of Pittsburgh, where he was a little prone to playing up on the roof, and getting him down in the box and in the nickel and moving him around, and you saw the instincts, right? But if Minkah prefers, once again, to take on his career not in a place that is down to the foundation and starting from scratch, what are you going to do, right? You sit here and hold his feet to the fire, and or if you can get a decent pick, you get a decent pick, right? And that's at the core. It goes back to the culture element of what the thought process of building through the draft is. But you want to bring guys in that become invested in one another and grow together and universally speak the same language, if you will, on this is how we do things. And if Minkah, with his first stop in Miami and then in Pittsburgh and then back to Miami, if he doesn't want to spend the later chapters of his career there, and the alternative is not paying what's probably going to be $18 million a year on a contract extension, and you get a mid-round pick, what are you going to do, man? Like, there's collateral when you reset your roster. And that's presumably where we're at. I do think south of the Devon Achans and the Patrick Pauls and the Aaron Brewers and the Jordan Brookses of the world and the Jalen Waddles of the world, this is probably the highest value player that you could move on from this offseason. That's not like, is he a long-term building block? And I think Minkah Fitzpatrick could be a 3-year, you were to take a 3-year snapshot and give him a 2-year contract extension and pay him 3 years. And if you paid him top 5 safety money is $18, $19 million a year, like plus the 14 that he's owed and with maybe, or 15 that he's owed with a touch of a raise, right? It could end up being a 3-year, $56 million contract if there was an extension to be had there. And I wouldn't shy away from paying the money because once the Dolphins offload Tua Tagovailoa at some point this offseason, and if you missed it this morning, Jeff Darlington did an awesome hit on the Joe Rowe show and talked about kind of the split. And he was pretty not shy that Tua being back in Miami is not going to happen at one point in that interview. So knowing that money's coming off the books in 2027, the Dolphins are going to be dead last in the league in cash spending for 2027, entering into free agency in 2026. Knowing that Tua is going to be off the roster and there's maybe $3 million in guarantees, but now you're moving on from potentially Minkah. Maybe a couple of guys get pay raises. Does Devon Achane get an extension, or do you do that next offseason? Like, when we roll around and it's March 11th and it's time to push play, you're going to look 1 year from now. What does everybody have on the books? The Dolphins are going to be dead last in the league in cash spending, which is good. That's how it's supposed to be when you're resetting your cap books. But it's going to be such an umpteenth degree and extreme that I wouldn't have batted an eye if you were going to keep a player like Minkah around. Now, maybe they don't like their trade offers and maybe they do hold his feet to the fire and let this process play itself out. But I think you have the potential for a seller's market here with Minkah, which is what we're going to talk about next here on the show. So naturally, like you guys, stick with us. Welcome to the 5-Hour Energy Flavor Draft. We're looking at every aspect of the draft to let you know which tasty flavors are best and which ones might be sleepers. The board is set, the flavors are ready, and only one is going to take the top spot. 5-Hour Energy has a wide variety of flavors, something for everyone. But with the first pick in this draft, you can sign me up for cherry. Bold cherry candy style flavor, sweet with a light tart edge, classic red fruit profile, bright punchy taste, smooth and easy to recognize, and clean, slightly tangy finish. But do not sleep on cotton candy, a swirl of fruity twist, hint of vanilla, the sweet side of tasty caffeine. Find your new favorite flavor at 5-Hour Energy Shots, available online at 5-Hour Energy or at Amazon. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inboxes overflowing. The one position you have to fill is sitting open still. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit the profile of what you're looking for, from skills, experience, and location. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute that I have been talking to all of you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching, more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now to support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. If you need to hire, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Potential for a buyer's market. I think the first thing you have to do when you're talking about somebody who's bringing on veteran players, I think the most sensible place to start can be teams that have low cash budgets, right? And it's the world in which the Dolphins live, but the Dolphins are on the way down. They're getting younger. They're getting cheaper. Are there teams in the bottom half of the league that have low cash budgets that are trying to compete, a team that has a general manager that's on the hot seat or a head coach on the hot seat or a team that's got a rookie contract quarterback that's willing to get all kinds of crazy because they want to jumpstart that roster. It's that trap that the Dolphins fell into and paid the price for. The two teams in the league right now for 2026 with the lowest cash budgets are the New York Jets and the Las Vegas Raiders. Probably not a surprise. Right? Maybe Las Vegas could be of interest because they have the number 1 overall pick. The Jets don't feel like they're doing the same thing the Dolphins are doing. Right? The Chargers are the 3rd lowest in cash budget, followed by the Titans, the Saints, the Falcons, the Commanders, the Dolphins, the Texans, the Browns, the Bengals, the Panthers, the Steelers, and that is 20 through 32 on the cash budget list. I think about names that could use a Minkah Fitzpatrick, and the Saints they're just coming out of their 5-year wilderness retreat from a salary cap perspective for how Mickey Loomis kind of took them through their journey. Now they are still dead last in the league in cap, so they have minus $41.7 million in cap space. They do have plenty of wiggle room in which to navigate if they wanted to. They have some expensive contracts on the roster, but they've got guys with base salaries like Chase Young and Alvin Kamara and Carl Granderson and Eric McCoy. They're all $10 million plus. Chris Olave, Cesar Ruiz is $9.5. Juwan Johnson, Justin Reed. They have a ton of restructure potential in their contract. And, they feel like they've got a rookie quarterback that maybe they can kind of click in and get rolling. Washington is a team that really stands out to me with Dan Quinn. Washington currently has the 5th most cap space in the NFL, $66.5 million, according to SpotTrack. And they have the 26th highest, or 7th lowest, Kyle does math live on the show, cash spend. So Washington has high cap, low cash, Jaden Daniels in year 3, Dan Quinn, regression from year 1 to year 2 to now year 3, where maybe there's a little bit of pressure. Eagles showing some vulnerability. Dallas, big questions on defense. The Giants sold their souls to John Harbaugh, right? The division's kind of out there. Washington feels like a team that makes a ton of sense to me. Cincinnati, right? There's a pressure to put better players around Joe Burrow. The Bengals currently sit 7th in cap space at $52.7 million. That's almost $8 million more than the number 8 team, the LA Rams. So Cincinnati, they're in the bottom 10 teams in cash spend, and they're in the top 8 in cap space. And Zach Taylor and Joe Burrow's flirting at the podium with the idea of not being happy in Cincinnati and how hard it is to play in Cincinnati. You just read between the lines a little bit. I think that's a team that might make some sense to try to want to make a splash. I would also point out if it's more of a short-term deal, like if Minkah was willing to play the last year of his contract out, the Rams, I think, are a team to watch. Now, the Rams have a lot of guys they got to pay. But the Rams, from a cash spend perspective, they've been at the bottom of the league the last couple of years. The Rams were 31st in cash spend in 2025. They were 31st in 2024. 2023, they were 32nd. So the last 3 years, they've been 32nd, 31st, and 31st in cash spending. Brother, it's time to ramp it up from a spending perspective if you're the Rams. So the Rams are 8th in cap space, but they are 17th in the league in cash spend. And Les Snead has shown a willingness to accelerate to these timelines for splash players. Now, they have Quentin Lake as a nickel who they just signed a contract extension to, but Cam Curl's an expiring contract. Maybe you can embrace some more interchangeability with your safeties, and I think Cam Curl's a good player. I don't think he's Minkah Fitzpatrick. And the secondary is one of the issues that kind of snuck up on the Rams, who I thought were an awesome team. They've got a bunch of guys. You go through what these guys are getting paid in cash this year, you get a load of Puka Nacua is under $6 million. Byron Young's under $6 million. Kobe Turner's under $4 million. Steve Avila's under $4 million. Jared Verse is getting $2.1 million this year. Fisk is getting 1.6. Cam Kinches is getting 1.3. It really is hilarious to sit here and scroll through some of the impact players that they have and what those guys are getting paid. Right. And obviously Matthew Stafford is at the top of that list. And their second highest paid player is Devontae Adams, who's in the second year of a deal. And this is probably going to ride off into the sunset after this year when it's all said and done. At least in Los Angeles. They just had Rob Havenstein, who was a $10+ million player, retire. They could probably move on from a couple of these guys too and save some more cash as they get ready to really pay up on these young rookie contract players. I mean, Puka Nacua, Byron Young, Kobe Turner, those guys are all going into contract years this year. They're probably going to get extensions. Puka's probably going to get more than Matthew Stafford. But if Minkah's willing to play the last year and then say, hey, like, send me someplace where we could really ramp it up and get after it, I think the Rams make a ton of sense too. So we've identified the Rams, the Commanders. We've identified the Bengals. I think the Colts are an interesting team. They're in 13th in cash spending, and they have to figure out what they're going to do with Alec Pierce at wide receiver, and they need to re-extend Daniel Jones after what was kind of a disappointing finish for him. From cap space perspective, they're over $35 million. They're 11th in the league, so they've got the spending power. I'd be surprised if the Chargers went that way. Maybe they want the all versatile combo of Derwin James and Minkah Fitzpatrick. I mean, they have an overwhelming amount of cap space to do this. They have $82 million in cap space. I think them and the Raiders are hard teams to ignore just because of how much room they have. It's from Minkah's perspective, like if you're going to work for a contract extension, are you vibing with teams like the Chargers as a West Coast team as Minkah? Are you vibing with the Raiders or the Titans as teams that haven't won a lot of games but have young quarterbacks? What's more important to you at this point if you're Minkah? I would assume it's the competitive angle, but I don't know. And he probably will have some say, and I'm sure they will try to get all even options on the table and try to appease Minkah too, because if Minkah's going to be doing a contract extension wherever, if he gets traded, he's going to want to be on board with his landing spots. Not a coincidence when this happens, though. We're going to talk about that on the other side of the break. Make sure you guys stick with us.
Hey, it's Matt Derry from the Locked On Lions podcast. The people I love depend on me. If I'm gone, the financial responsibilities don't disappear. I didn't want my family figuring things out during the hardest moment of their lives. That's why I knew only one place to go. I chose life insurance through my friends at Ethos. Ethos makes getting life insurance fast and easy, 100% online. You can get a quote in seconds, apply in minutes, and get same-day coverage. So there's no medical exam. You just answer a few simple health questions. You can get up to $3 million in coverage. Some policies are as low as $30 a month. I love the folks at Ethos. Protect your family with life insurance from Ethos now by going to ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. In as little as 10 minutes, you can get the free quote and up to $3 million in coverage at ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. That is ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. Ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. Application times and rates may vary.
So not a coincidence, I don't think, that this came out when it did. When you consider the NFL Combine is next week, right? And I'll be there. I'm flying out this weekend to get into Indianapolis, and I'll be there all week next week. So we'll be boots on the ground in Indy for the NFL Combine. I'll be there with A to Z Sports and, of course, doing all of the coverage here on Locked On for both Locked On Dolphins and Locked On NFL Scouting. Hopefully do some stuff on Radio Row, get together with a couple of friends, media spaces across other places. It's going to be a lot of fun, right? It's the watering hole. It's the pre-offseason calendar opening watering hole. Not just for media, for everybody. All the head coaches, right? Some teams don't send the coaches, right? It's what the Rams have now popularized. We're going to send a smaller conglomerate to kind of do the data collection, and that's it. But by and large, everybody of significance is going to be there. So, sorry, I just had a ping pop up. Getting a chance to sit down or BS or over a beer or a drink or a steak with an agent, or have that agent do it with you and then go talk to this team or this GM and this GM. You can catch them out at one of the bars or the steakhouses. A lot of business is going to get done. And the teams cannot obviously talk individually to players because that would be tampering. But if you think it's a coincidence that all this legal tampering window opens, and they've done a much better job about getting more discreet about it, right? Legal tampering window opens. Deal, so-and-so signing for record-setting money. 5 minutes later, another record-setting contract agreed to terms with so-and-so. Now they at least space it out a little bit. They don't you-know-what on you and have the audacity to call it rain. But a lot of business is getting done in Indianapolis. So for the Dolphins to effectively put the for sale sign up now, going into Indy, sets the stage for them to try to maximize their offers and their interest. And this is one of those ones where, look, if you would save $6 million in cap space if you traded Minkah Fitzpatrick. At some point, the conversation is going to stop being about the cap space. And I think, frankly, we're already there with what the cash spending means for what it's going to look like next year. Between the mature contracts of guys like Minkah and Chubb and Tyreek and Austin Jackson, plus Tua Tagovailoa, it was about $200 million in cap debt that you were going to have to offload in a 2-year window to bring this reset all the way around. So think of it that way. It's a 2-year block this year and next year to offload $200 million in cap debt. They're already at 79. If they offload Minkah, it's another 13 or 12. If they offload Austin Jackson, it's another 13. Do you offload some smaller names? I mean, some middle-class names on the roster, the Alec Ingolds of the world, the Tyrell Dotsons of the world, the Jason Sanders of the world. There's not like large cap numbers there. But the big difference in why, like, I get why this is how we're going to go about our business right now is offloading those players now also relieves the cash obligations that would require you to spread it out over this year and future years of cap to no longer have them on the roster, right? You've not just you're not just in the process of accelerating getting rid of the debt, you're also cutting the spending that you're doing. So you accelerate how quickly that scale flips the other way. So I would not be surprised if we get to the start of the league year in about 2.5 weeks and we have a resolution on Minkah Fitzpatrick. And that very easily could come full circle because the Dolphins are going to want to know what a lot of their big chips are before they finalize what path they end up taking with Tua Tagovailoa. And we might find that out next week as well. Like usually the head coaches and the GMs talk. Miami hasn't had a GM talk any year I've been to the Combine because Chris never talks at the Combine. So I'm hoping, I would expect we get John Eric Sullivan and Jeff Hafley at Combine press conferences at the podiums next week. That'd be pretty sweet for me to go to Indy and have a GM for the Dolphins at the Combine doing a press conference because it's only ever been kind of like an off the beaten path, discreet thing with the local media. So we'll see. But I think the timing here makes all the sense in the world for Miami. I'm interested to see if there's any vets that they do bring back. Like, do you bring back Rasul Douglas? And specifically in the secondary, do you bring back Kader Kohu? Because there's a chance that could be a cheaper contract because of the injury on a 1-year deal for a couple $1 million. Do you bring back Rasul Douglas? Probably not based off all of this stuff that's happening. And Kader's like low-key not a young guy. Well, he's a young guy. Let me not disrespect all my late 20s folks that listen to the show, but for NFL player standards, and particularly for cornerbacks, where the age of 30 is kind of like this unsettling cloud that lingers on the horizon. Well, Kader turns 28 this year. Now, you could bring it back, no questions asked, on him, probably on a one-year deal. I would assume with the injury, you wouldn't want to overextend and overcommit. But it'll be interesting because Kader has some inside-outside flexibility. The safety room is kind of Dante. If you move on from Minkah, it's Dante Trader, and who knows, right? And I think that the moving on from Minkah would set the stage for Dante to be well-equipped to go out and seize the opportunity and have a very big role on the team. They've got the opportunity to bring back a couple of young guys, right? Like Storm Duck's under contract. Juju Brents is under contract. And I know we don't hear these names. You know, Ethan Bonner's an exclusive rights restricted free agent. They could tender for minimum salary and bring him back, like no questions asked. They could choose to do that if they wanted to. But there's some interesting competition with young players there. You contrast that to safety, where it's, what is it? Without Minkah Fitzpatrick, it's going to be Omar Brown and Dante Trader, and that's it. So I think it does kind of flip the scales, and they have a chance to add even more if they choose to bring back some of these other names in cornerback. We'll see. Another step closer to a little bit of clarity for the start of the league year. It's going to be an exciting couple of weeks in that regard, right? And obviously then we'll ramp up the draft stuff after that. I'm not expecting a super active free agency window, but we'll get a lot of clarity. And I think they're going about their business the right way. I understand why this is a business move they are pursuing with Minkah, even if it's not necessarily what my preferred choice would be. And at the end of the day, my preferred choice, it doesn't matter, right? I'm not running the team. That's going to do it for us here today on the show. Kyle Krabs, you can keep it locked in here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Appreciate you guys as always. Make it a great rest of your Thursday. I'll be back again tomorrow to close out the week. Go Fins.